It was sometime around 10 years ago that I made this knife. Look at that sheath. I made it out of a piece of milk carton and duct tape. And the blade never did hold an edge because it wasn't tempered. The handle wrap is nice, though. I really like the handle wrap. And I'm going to redo that same thing when I get through with it. And so let's get started on it. The first thing we do is just unwrap it all. Let's start from scratch. Now you notice that it's magnetic. So we're going to heat it up until it is no longer magnetic. It's got to get a good cherry red to get to the place where it's not magnetic anymore. And then as soon as we get through with that and it's not magnetic, we're going to dip it into this oil down here and quench it. Now that's going to set the temper pretty hard. So the next thing to do is we're going to put a coat of paint on it after we sand it down, and then we'll get started on it. Now to wrap that handle, it's not a hard process. You pull out a little bit more than you need through that first hole, and then you just wrap a over and under pattern, weaving that tag in there. I'm going to go 2 times around, and then I'll start going under. And I'll finish that pattern out and then get down to the last hole down there. And once I got it all finished and I'm down there at that last hole, then I'll stick the ends in, one through one way and one through the other way. Then tie a series of knots on it to hold that off. Then we'll burn the ends on those knots after we trim them. And once we get them burnt off and everything looking in good shape like we want it, here we go, snip, snip. Then I'll take it a step further after that. After those ends are burnt, then I'm going to put some hot glue just to keep it from coming untied. This is a 6-inch knife, and it's looking pretty good, but now we need to get it sharp. So the next thing, we'll start with the 240 grit, establish an edge, then we'll move to the 120 grit, and then to the 800 grit, and then we'll move to the buffing belt. Now I'm using the 20-degree angle on this knife because it's not a thick knife. 20 degree is normally what you would use for a kitchen knife, but it works good for this thickness of blade. So here I am going through the different belts, and get down there, and lo and behold, you can pull the hair right off of your arm on that thing. So I'm happy with it there. We just need to touch up the paint, and then we need to make the sheath. So here we are back, day 2. I've got it painted, and let's get started on this sheath. I laugh when I look at this sheath. Oh, I was just having fun 10 years ago. So we'll lay out a pattern here, and once we get that pattern established, then we'll use that pattern to cut the vinyl siding that I'm going to use. Now the vinyl siding is, I've got a piece of corner siding, which is what I like to use, so I have to flatten it out. When you're using a heat gun like this, don't leave it in one spot too long. Move it quickly so it doesn't, and watch it. See, it'll just go flat on you. We'll play with it for a minute, let it cool off, make sure that it's still flat, and then we can cut out our pieces. Lay my template up here, mark it off, cut them out. And once we get them cut, then we're going to examine them, make sure that they're identical. If they're not, we'll trim them down. Then, with them both clamped together, I'm going to heat up this awl here and pierce some holes in there. And these are holes that are going to go for the grommets. Got some nice brass grommets here. Put the long part in the bottom, stick it down over the hole, put the top part on, give it a couple of whacks with a hammer, and you've got a nice grommet set in there. Just don't hit your fingers. Yep, it's looking pretty good, but now I need some holes down through there for the lacing. We're going to lace this thing up. So now that the holes are in there for the lacing, we'll go ahead and lace it up, and here it is, all done, painted, laced, everything's done. I even laser engraved onto the blade. Everything's ready to go. I'm thinking about giving this knife away. I tend to give knives away a lot, so I'll think about it hard.